Hello and welcome back to another RiftGuides WildRift video. Today we're going to take a look at Counter the Meta for all the reasons there are. Counter the Meta is not only a format that is only patch related, but also generally theme related, so specific champions will almost always defeat other champions, depending obviously on the numbers. But before we hop into that, let's talk about our question of the day. What meta pick do you fear the most? Let me know in the comments below. Now, to make you understand the reasoning between thematic counterpick and real counterpick, let's talk about our next matchup. It's Morgana against Nautilus. Nautilus' typical play is to engage from very high range with his ultimate ability or his anchor. Morgana has a tool which is a basic ability which can deny either of those. So, with that in mind, Morgana is a thematical counter to Nautilus. Just makes life very difficult. Not to mention that if you have a Nautilus on the team and you also add a Morgana to it, you make life misery for the enemy team. They can't play anymore because they can't move anymore. But generally speaking, Morgana performs really well into Nautilus. He just doesn't have the ability to lock her down, and if he doesn't have the ability to lock her down in an all-in, then the Morgana will just decimate the enemy team in its entirety. The only issue with this thematic counterpick is that if the Nautilus numbers are too high, then he will just blast through every shield there is and then follow up with the next spell afterwards and then get people killed just due to damage. So as of right now, Nautilus has very high AP numbers which allow him to one-shot people, but if Morgana uses her black shield to stop him from doing so, for example with the anchor or the ultimate ability, the Nautilus will immediately die afterwards, because the Nautilus is squishy. The Nautilus is full AP and dies instantaneously upon being touched, and that's the biggest problem with him. Morgana, on the other hand, is absolutely non-committal as a champion and can play the game from super high range, scale into the late game and become a menace that nobody can deal with. If you're at the later stages of the game, Morgana just needs to put down the puddle, and if you step into the puddle once, you lose like 15% of your HP instantly over 3 seconds. It's lovely, we love this champion, it requires barely any skill and all you have to know about this champion is to properly clear your jungle and play around your power spikes. The next champion I want to talk about is Gwen. Gwen is very good against tanky champions because she has very high DPS, consistent DPS as well on top, and it's true damage as well, while also adding super high AoE damage and keeping herself safe from backline threats thanks to her second ability. Now, what do you have to do to beat tanks with Gwen? In laning phase, it's very important that you combine your first ability and your third ability and dash forward trying to chip out the enemy. Getting that done allows you to gain wave control and chip damage onto the enemy. Obviously, you should take away the enemy's bone plating beforehand, otherwise your trait will be reduced by 100 damage on just level 1, like roughly 100. Then as the game goes on, you want to complete the Rift Maker as fast as possible. With the Rift Maker in your pocket, you have additional sustain in combination with your Conqueror to sustain through all the fights you will take against them. But your primary goal is to safely scale and just punish the enemy when possible as you go towards free items. AP champions have the typical problem upon hitting free items that they are just too strong. They touch you and they'll just destroy you, and there's not much that can be done against it. Next patch, new items will be in the game and we might see a change to that, but we don't 100% know that yet, because it needs to settle first. But for now, and probably for the foreseeable future if that isn't changed, because you can't just rush magic resist items, you will just heavily outscale them and get them killed relatively easy because they can't deal enough damage to you while you sustain through that damage while killing them. It's quite an interesting combination. And the biggest issue with Gwen is that even if she's killing your tank, she becomes immune because of her second ability, while also hitting your entire backline with a lovely needlework. The next matchup is my favorite, it's Soraka. Soraka is very powerful against almost all Enchanters in the game, especially against Nami. But thematically speaking, Soraka is the hard counter towards most of the Enchanters in the game. Not really any Enchanter can keep up against the Soraka, and if it's possible, it's mostly linked to the AD carry, because Soraka's laning phase is the most toxic laning phase out of all Enchanter laning phases next to a Karma. But Karma, on the other hand, needs to get you killed, but Soraka will just slowly kill you and win a war of attrition. And I'll just walk you through it. On level 1, you want to heavily trade the enemy, get away their bone plating and use your first ability to sustain yourself up again. You heal 60 health upon hitting one first ability, which is a lot of bonus health. It's just like 1.5 auto attacks in the early stages of the game. Now, having done that, you will use your relic shield stacks to sustain yourself. Obviously, you want to accumulate 2 stacks before you just proc it, because otherwise your cooldown will be increased. It's a little bug in the game. With that done, you want to keep in mind that the lower you are, the more the relic shield will heal you. And also in mind that your ally, if he's really smart, is going to trade heavily alongside you. And if he's low HP and then you hit level 2 with the power of Relic Shield and heal yourself up quite a bit, and are allowed to hit another first ability, the laning phase will be over. If you survive through level 1 and get to heavily trade with the enemy, so you're roughly even HP both on 50%, and get to level 2 to then hit your first ability on an enemy champion, you will just win the lane. There's not much the enemy can do anymore because now you'll sustain your ally while not losing any HP. The healing from your first ability will cover up the entire cost of your second ability, which is also reduced because of your first ability, and it's also applied to your ally, which then heals him for like 150 on just level 1 alone. So, and it doesn't even match up with the Airy proc on top, which is another shield which your ally can use for fighting. So you see, you'll just out-sustain them. Then afterwards, it's just a race towards level 8, and then level 8 to level 9, you'll become a monster. You have infinite cooldown on your second ability, and you just heal everyone for free. All you have to do is play from behind, hit the enemy tanks, which well are upon us, and then spam your second ability. That's it, and your champion is absolutely broken in a thematical count against any enchanter in the game, or basically tanks as well. Next up comes another thematical counter that is very broken in the pen meta. It is Vex. Vex performs exceptionally well against anything that dashes during the laning phase or generally in the game. So champions such as Ahri and Yasuo have it very troublesome against this champion, because every time they dash they give Vex a passive charge which deals bonus damage, and with Gloom applied on them, her spells also deal bonus damage since they trigger Gloom as well. With that in mind, her passive Fear will also be recharged earlier and the damage will skyrocket and basically rendering you useless. So it's very dangerous to just do those things against the Vex, especially during the laning phase and as the game goes on. Obviously, Yasuo has access to items such as Wit's End and his Wind Wall, and that makes the life of Vex relatively hard in comparison, especially because Yasuo's Wind Wall blocks Vex's third ability. That is something you need to understand because Vex sends out a shadow which is barely visible to then hit the target location, and once that happens, then the spell is triggered. If that doesn't happen, which happens if the spell is blocked by a Yasuo Wind Wall because the shadow cannot reach the target destination, the spell is just cancelled. However, here's a neat trick with Vex. You can cast your third ability and flash into it to immediately trigger it. The same applies to just casting it beneath your own feet, because that instantly triggers the spell. So if you're facing anything with high movement, Vex is gonna be your go-to pick. Even champions such as Akali have it very troublesome against this champion unless they hit their third ability on her. Because don't forget, Akali has a lot of movement spells in her kit, and every single time it procs Vex passive, allowing her to get a passive recharge faster, dealing bonus damage on top. And if that happens, then the Akali will get feared and probably killed, and the only thing that's her saving grace is the Shroud. So the same thing applies to basically any champion, and Vex just has to play it passively and wait for her chance to pounce, and then she'll have an easy time. That is if you go for the full pen build, which is Luden's Echo, Prophet's Pendant, and Void Staff. And if you feel really fancy, you can also go Sudden Impact to get 25 pen with just 1000 gold investment plus a rune, which is really powerful against any squishy in the game because you will literally one-tap them. Long story short, Vex is really good into heavy engage as well because of her CC capabilities. She's able to just dominate and dictate the teamfight's pace with her power, and once she gets into the reset territory, similar to the Katarina, she just has to attack the enemy with her ultimate ability, wait for other cooldowns to come up again, and then go in and get everyone killed. If you want an AD carry that is quite well into full engage, then I have Xayah for you. Xayah loves to fight front to back and letting the enemy walk into her. With that in mind, her feathers will then absolutely destroy the opposition. For that, Navori Quick Blades are a necessity. The less cooldown you have on your third ability, the better your champion becomes because the enemy will not be able to move. For the laning phase, in general, Xayah can abuse her feather-empowered auto attacks to chip out the enemy without really attacking them. All she has to do is using minions as a proxy target to increase her auto attack range with the feathers. So if she's hitting a minion and there's somebody behind the minion, the feathers will obviously have extended range compared to the normal auto attack range to then proc enemy bone plating or the steel chip damage. The next thing you have to keep in mind with Xayah is having the quick combo in mind. Cast your second ability auto attack, instantly input your first ability, and obviously cast your third ability instantaneously in sequence. You can practice that in practice tool to get it right properly, and then you'll see a little delay between the feathers going out and coming back, but the enemy will get rooted regardless almost instantaneously. And that way you'll have an easy time getting somebody locked down, and once they're locked down, they're not a threat anymore and you can input more auto attacks into them or make up some space. Similar to that, you also have your own peel tools to survive alongside your feathers in general. You have an ultimate that allows you to avoid any incoming damage super easily, and then laying out a field of feathers, which then can be used to instantly kill people that run at you. Don't forget, the enemy running at you has to always respect the feathers, because if they don't, they'll get rooted in place and absolutely demolished. So even if you're hitting the front line and the backliners are moving up into your team, there's still feathers on the ground that need to be respected, because if they don't, you'll just hit them from super high range and your teammates can also clean up the slack. It's super nice, I love this champion. And that's it for today's video. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel and come back tomorrow for more.